hello everybody. I've got with me Mary Byrne, and hello Mary.
Hi, Tiamara. Thanks for
Hi.
having me on today.
Oh, it's lovely to have you, especially since you haven't been feeling so well.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you've managed to come on with us today because it is actually a critical moment right now, which you have been prepared for. You've been preparing for, you've been fighting against this moment happening. And so, and of anyone that I've met, I think you're the most well versed in the whole fluoridation matter. And so I was
Mm.
keen to talk to you as I felt the shivers down my spine when when I heard that Dr. Bloomfield is being given the portfolio over fluoridation, and they're now taking it out of our local centres and wanting to nationalise it. And is just another one of these tyrannical things that's happening in our country. And I wanted to talk to you because, as with everything related to this is actually part of a global agenda, but it's also a national agenda. But when it comes to these globalist agendas, because I do believe that everything related to medicine is a globalist agenda, and it has been corrupted and taken over, and they're not about. So what they're based on is this mass propaganda. So everything that I've seen in the news has been about how it's fabulous. And
Yeah.
so we need to bring the other side of the argument, and we need to point out everything that people need to know about fluoridation. So first of all, tell us a bit about how long you've been on this issue and what brought you to it in the first place.
Oh, okay. So I was living in Petone in 1999, and in the Hutt Valley, there's artesian water, and none of the water was chlorinated, at least for Lower Hutt in Petone. And but the rest of Lower Hutt had fluoride, but Petone didn't. And anyway, Lower Hutt City Council had taken over the Petone Borough Council, and they said that they wanted to shift the water supply into the Waterloo water supply, which is in Lower Hutt. So that meant that Petone would get fluoridated. So luckily, I had just found out about fluoridation just a couple of months prior. So prior to that, I believe that fluoride was some sort of nutrient, like a mineral, that it was like calcium or magnesium, that everybody needed it, that most countries did it, particularly Western countries, that it was good for teeth, and that they wouldn't do it if there was any doubts about harm. So that's what I'd sort of grown up thinking. And then a couple of months prior to that move of them wanting to fluoridate Petone, I'd read a book and it had a chapter about fluoridation, and I found out all of those things were wrong. So it's not a mineral. It has no, we've got no bodily requirement for fluoride. In fact, it's just a contaminant. Um, Most countries in the world don't do it. So including, most of Europe, like hardly anywhere in Europe does it, just 10% of UK, 70% of Ireland, and one city in Spain. But apart from that, none of them do it. Some of them did have it, and they've all rejected it years and years and years ago. um, and it's not good for teeth, swallowing it. Maybe applying it to your teeth, but I don't use a fluoride toothpaste because it is a poison. So it makes no sense to put a poison into your mouth and it get absorbed in your gums. And there's huge. It's not just doubt anymore. Now it's totally proven that there's harms from fluoridation. So, when I started in 1999, maybe you could have argued that there were doubts. But I mean, what I'd read, it was like, well, these are serious issues, what were being brought up back then. And so I thought, well, you wouldn't put anything in a water supply, because if you get that wrong, then you are totally wrong. You're wrong for every single person, and that's for their lifetime. So it's like the worst, just about the worst thing. It's hard to know after this last year, isn't it? But it's sort of like the worst thing you can do, isn't it? If you're wrong, you've just really, really screwed up. But yeah, they do. They just continue to ignore the science, and they continue to lie, actually. That's what they do. So what happened for me was I thought, there's no way it's going into my drinking water. And the way I felt then was like over my dead body. Over my dead body would they put fluoride into Petoni's drinking water. So we had a big campaign. I had a friend me and a friend, got together and we started a thing called Safe Water Action Petone. We had a big petition, and what the council did in the end was they moved a fluoride injector from the Waterloo pumping station to an outlet that only goes to the rest of Lower Hutt. And then they bought another fluoride injector so that when the water went into Wellington, it could get fluoridated. But the water coming through Korokoro Petone is still non-fluoridated even today. But with this latest, it won't stay that way. It will definitely get fluoridated.
Well done you back then. So do you have a plan now?
Well, do we have a plan now? Well, I suppose what we're thinking now is that really what we need is local groups. We need people to start local groups all over the country, particularly in the non-fluoridated areas, because it's the non-fluoridated areas where people really mostly get up in arms. It seems to be perhaps a human thing that whatever you're used to, you just accept. So people in fluoridated areas have had fluoride, so a lot of them are like, oh, well, it hasn't done me any harm, which often is not the case. It will have done them some harm. And it may even be that they've got low thyroid function, or they're getting arthritis, or their immune system is compromised, but they don't put two and two together. They don't think it would be that, it would be the fluoride in the water. And but in the non-fluoridated areas, people take a step back and go, well, hang on a sec, what do I need that for? We can just brush our teeth. Our kids' teeth are okay. And, if I really want them to have fluoride, I can make sure they have fluoride toothpaste, or even buy the tablets. But hardly anyone buys the tablets because most people don't see the need. And they don't work as well.
Yeah.
So that's our plan, is everybody in non-fluoridated areas, and to have a petition. So what we've thought is they have a petition to the local council to say they want the local council to do a survey. So the survey, the local council should do a survey of everybody, asking them whether or not they want fluoridation. Even though we never think the decision should even be made by the local council, it should be made by individuals. We all should have the right to choose what medicine we take. But the local council have been voted in, and they're paid by us to represent us. So therefore, they should find out what the community thinks, and they should represent us to government and go back to government and say our community does not want it. And what we find in the non-fluoridated areas is that people normally are against fluoridation, more so than for it. So the chances are that if they did a survey, the majority of the population will say they don't want it. So we think that's about where we've come to at the moment, about what we think would be a plan of action.
Just thinking about that though, is that not a bit like saying we should take a vote whether everyone has to be vaccinated?
Well, that's the thing, is I don't want it to be a referendum, say, right? Because we have always been against any referendum, because that is exactly what it's like. Our neighbour should not decide what medicine we take, whether it's fluoride or vaccines or aspirin or anything, right? So all we're thinking at this point is that if the councils did a survey, then that would give them ammunition to the government. Do you see what I mean? Because say like in Whangarei, the mayor there is saying her community doesn't want it, but the community hasn't had a referendum since at least 20 years. So the government is going, oh, well, that's over 20 years old, you can't rely on that. But if she had a survey now saying 75% of the Whangarei population does not want fluoridation, that would give her some ammunition going back to the government, because then they know that they're doing it completely against what most people want.
Yes, although I would have thought 10% of people not wanting it should be enough. Like in the end, if it's about your body, you should get to choose. And if they want people to be fluoridated, they can offer free fluoride tablets to everybody who wants to give their kids fluoride tablets or whatever, and let the water be pure. I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me. I don't want even any % of the population deciding what goes in my water.
No, I know they shouldn't. But the government is not really interested in our health, as I don't think.
No.
Or they know nothing about health or something. Because what they could do is the Scottish Child Smile program. If they were really interested in helping children's teeth, they would implement the Scottish Child Smile project, which is school toothbrushing for like early, like nursery school, and year 1 and 2, maybe 3 and 4. That idea, because what they found in Scotland was they did an investment into that, so they had to employ teacher aides or whatever, and the kids brush their teeth at school once a day, maybe twice a day, I'm not sure. But it's seriously reduced dental decay. It's half the number of general anaesthetics, and it's the general anaesthetics that are the problem. It's that they have children having severe dental decay, because for most children, like half the children don't have any dental decay anyway, whether it's fluoridated or non-fluoridated in New Zealand. Then for the ones that do, it's an average of 1, maybe 2 fillings at the most. That's what most of the kids who've got dental decay have, about 1.5 fillings sort of thing. So, but there's a pocket of children that have really bad dental decay. And, it could be a whole host of reasons. And, I know there'll be some people saying, oh, it's all the sugar and all that. And yeah, it could be, but it could be antibiotics. It could be their mother was on antibiotics. There's just so many things happening these days that it's too easy to blame, I think. Although, of course, we need to cut down on sugar. Everybody should be cutting down on sugar. But with the school toothbrushing, they've found that at half the number of general anaesthetics. So that would be the most sensible thing to bring in. And also because the severe dental decay is happening just as much in the fluoridated areas as the non-fluoridated areas. It's really to do with socioeconomics. So, we'll find in parts of Wellington, the poor parts of Wellington have got, issues with serious dental decay.
And awful lot of that's going to be to do with diet, isn't it? Like your carbohydrates. If you're getting carbohydrates, eating a lot of white bread and cheap foods, and they're turning into sugars, you're going to end up with more decay. I see an awful lot of babies walking around with juice in their bottles. That's a great way to rot children's teeth. So with the Scottish, did they fluoridate the water as well?
No, they don't fluoridate the water.
Yeah.
But, and then you see with the carbohydrates, a lot of people don't even know that. And this is where the government never give the education. And then if they do know it, you look at the price of a loaf of white bread. It's like $1 or $1.20. If you wanted to buy a good loaf of bread, it's, from an organic shop, sourdough, things like that, it's $10.
I know. So I want to know, there's so much power in what you said about over my dead body. That means every little part of your soul was committed to that. And I want to know, what did you do? Because it worked, Mary. What did you do?
Yeah, well, we did a petition. We did a petition, and we sat outside the supermarket. We put it all through the shops, through Petone. One of the things that helped us for the kind of the PR of it, I suppose, was that Petone used to be its own borough, and it had a lot of immigrant families. It had the gear meat works there. So it was a really poor area for a long, long time. And then in 1998, the Lower Hutt City Council took over Petone. So it became a suburb of Lower Hutt. Now, there was a lot of opposition in Petone to that move, because us Petoneyites felt that we were losing our identity and our ability to make decisions for ourselves. But anyway, it happened. But because of that resentment, a lot of people were already resentful, because then a year later, Lower Hutt are telling us we have to have fluoride in our water. So it just proved it, that they had taken over and, taking away our own identity and our ability to make decisions.
So the petition was, we don't want fluoride in the water.
Yeah.
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 And so I haven't had a chance to check, but this proposal for national takeover, is that a proposal or it's done?
It's not done yet, but it's a bill. There's a bill that's already had its first reading. So when it had its first reading, it was shifting decision making from the local councils to the DHBs. So we were opposed to that because that was already mandatory fluoridation, but by the back door, because the DHBs were going to do what the Ministry of Health said. So we had always been lobbying against that. And the National had brought that in. And then the Labour Green New Zealand First government came in, and there was a New Zealand First MP called Clayton Mitchell, and he was from Tauranga. Now, people from non-fluoridated areas are open to the fluoride issue, so he didn't want fluoridation. So he managed to keep a sort of a cap on it, to keep it stopped throughout that last government. But now New Zealand First is gone, so it's, Labour and the Greens, they're both totally for fluoridation, and so are National. So we'd already gone through the select committee process while National were in. So we'd already done the normal democratic steps where we all, there was thousands of us that put in a submission, hundreds of us went and spoke to the select committee. So under the understanding that it was the DHBs that were going to take over decision making. Now they're putting through a supplementary order paper that will be included in the second reading to say, no, it's not the DHBs, it's going to be Ashley Bloomfield. So they've changed the law or the bill substantially without any public input. They're not coming back to the New Zealand public and saying, are you okay with this? They're just dictating that this is the way it will be. And so once they have the second reading, then normally that is going to be law, but it does require a third reading. But it's not usual that after a second reading, a bill can be stopped.
So this would be a moment to actually, this would be a moment to actually campaign to get it back to local councils.
Yeah, we would much prefer it at local councils. And I mean, I'm suspicious that the reason that they've taken it, that decided not to leave it with the DHBs, is because we were going to lobby the DHBs. And, people in Christchurch and Tauranga and Rotorua, etc., were going to go to the DHBs and start telling those DHB members what the issue was. And the way that it was, the bill had been written, the DHB needed to sort of look into how they could provide dental health, So if we were then bringing the Scottish Child Smile program to them, the DHBs might have gone back to the government and said, well, actually, we just want to do the Scottish Child Smile program. So I think they started losing confidence in the DHB to make the decision they wanted. So they've just decided to give it to Ashley.
Okay. So interestingly, I was just listening to a couple of video clips, from the news in the last week or so. And there was a Dr. Aisha Viral who came out, and the journalists were asking her, what's the deal about fluoridation? And she had a very pre-scripted answer. And I could see very clearly that they were applying the same psychological tact that they've used with COVID. You see, I think what's happened is the government has suddenly decided, wow, this is like a cannon in the artillery. We've discovered how to psychologically get our way and to dominate the public. They've learned it from the Global Handbook because, of course, they didn't make up any of those things they said. They were told what to say from the WHO. And so it was very interesting. She said, she was asked, what do you think about it? She said, well, the reason we've done it is because then we can deliver a consistent science-based rollout across the country. And then someone else said, oh, well, what about the fact that some people are not happy about it? And she said, oh, I think that New Zealand has now seen in the, recent past that a consistent approach works, And so she kept repeating her same wording. She was saying a consistent science-based rollout So basically, they're playing the same psychological game that they've learned with COVID, and they're just getting into this entire national government control over jolly well everything. And water, as you say, this is a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
And we all have to say over our dead body. Over our dead body, will we let the government decide that they get to put anything in our water? Anything at all? Because if we want it in our water, or if they want it to put it in our water, then they can provide people the choice, an option to take a choice. And also, I mean, this Scottish child thing sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it is, and they know all about it.
The
government knows all about it.
They know all.
They tried to pretend. They tried to pretend that they're going to have the Scottish Child Smile program as part of it, but they're not. All they're saying they'll do is give out free toothbrushes and toothpaste, and I think that already happens. But that's not the main part of the Child Smile program.
No,
the main part is the school toothbrushing, and that teaches children a lifelong habit.
Absolutely, it really does. You've got to learn that lifelong habit that that you're going to brush after every meal. And I mean, I have to say, as an adult, it took me forever to learn to floss because I wasn't taught to floss as a child, and I bloody well hated it, you know. And now they've got those lovely little brushes, and I don't mind at all. But my dentist had to say it to me a lot of times. So if you get children to do it, then they learn it early on. I want you to talk us through, and I know you've mentioned a few things, but I really want you to clarify for everybody, Mary, the side effects of fluoride, or not side effects, the effects.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that we've been talking about mostly lately is the neurological effects, because that's where we've got the most science. So in the last few years, there's been about 4 studies that have been funded by the US government. So they're really top class studies. You know, nobody can fault them, as in they're not some obscure journal somewhere or other. And these are top scientists and researchers from the universities around North America, Canada, and the USA. So the first big one that came out, what they'd done is they had looked at the urine, the fluoride levels of the urine of pregnant women in Mexico. So in Mexico, they don't have fluoridated water, but they have fluoridated salt. And because what they can tell from the urine, they can see the level of fluoride, and they know that we excrete about half the fluoride that we ingest, which means that half the fluoride we ingest is stuck in our bodies, which is not good. But anyway, so that they can measure that. So then what they did is they were able to measure that against their offspring. So this was pregnant women, right? Their offspring's IQ. And what they found was there's definitely a lowering of IQ of about 5 IQ points when you move up to like fluoridated water of, say, 1 milligram per litre or something. So that was a big study, and that caused a lot of stir. And then the pro-fluoride people tried to say, well, it was in Mexico, it wasn't fluoridated water, but that's irrelevant because it was looking at total fluoride. And the really good thing is then it really matched each person, so it matched the mother to the child. Then they recreated that in Canada. So in Canada, about 30% of the water's fluoridated, and they fluoridated about 0.6 part per million. We fluoridate at 0.85. So where it's fluoridated in New Zealand, like Wellington and Auckland and Hamilton and Dunedin, that's the highest level of fluoridation in the world, the highest target. So no one else is as high as 0.85. The next one is Ireland at 0.75. Then the USA is 0.7. Canada is around 0.6. But anyway, at 0.6, they came up with the same results as the Mexican study, that when you increase fluoride, you lower the children's IQ. And that study then was published in JAMA Pediatrics. So JAMA Pediatrics is the top pediatric journal in the world. The editors of that, they had a podcast after they published it because they knew it was going to cause a lot of controversy. because there's all the pro-fluoride people, saying it can't possibly be true. And they said that they were really surprised at these results because they'd never really looked at fluoridation, and they'd always written it off as some kind of tinfoil hat thing. They'd been told like, oh, don't look at fluoride, that's just, woo-woo or whatever. And so they were like shocked and horrified really that this was happening, and that it appears to be about as bad as lead. So the same sort of, this is what they said. These are JAMA pediatric editors who were saying it, and they said they would not want their pregnant wife drinking fluoridated water. So that is a message that for anybody who listens to this is, please don't have fluoridated water if you're pregnant, or if you're bottle feeding a baby. Don't give fluoridated water to a bottle fed baby, because then the next study was just came out last year in Canada as well, and they found that bottle fed babies on fluoridated water had a 9-point lowering of IQ compared to non-fluoridated areas. So that's really significant. So even 5 IQ points, some people say, well, that doesn't really matter or whatever, because say for the vast majority of people, you won't notice whether their IQ is 100 or 105, for instance. It doesn't make that much difference. But what it does over a whole population is it halves the number of geniuses, and it increases by 50% the number of mentally impaired. So for the people at that end, that's made a huge difference from being able to cope, with living in our quite complex sort of world, to not being able to cope. And then also for society, if we lose half our geniuses, that's having a big effect on us. So 5 IQ points, and that's the sort of thing that they found with lead. So we're in the same ballpark as lead, and everybody knows that we shouldn't have lead. And it was that low chronic dose, coming from the petrol stations and the cars and all the rest of it. It's different than an acute dose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the neurotoxicity is the biggest one. Then the next thing is the thyroid, and the thyroid actually it's all linked together, because low thyroid function, if a pregnant woman has low thyroid function, that is connected to a lowering of IQ in her children. So that might be the whole mechanism of why in fluoridated areas there's a lowering of IQ in children, and it's because the mother has got a low thyroid. So then on top of the children being affected, the mother might be struggling with depression, weight gain, tiredness. They're the normal things that people suffer from thyroid, and so that's another whole lot of stuff that's happening in people's lives that just shouldn't be happening. So there was a big study in 2015 that was published in the British Medical Journal by research Professor Stephen Peckham, and what him and his team did was they went through every medical practice in the UK, and they looked at thyroid diagnosis, underactive thyroid diagnosis, and the amount of fluoride in the water. And they found that in fluoridated areas, you're 60% more likely to have an underactive thyroid than in a non-fluoridated area. So they worked out the figures on that, and it was something like for every 100,000 people, it was, I've actually written it down, it was an extra 242 people they would expect to have underactive thyroid. So in New Zealand, we've got a population of 5 million. It's roughly half. It's less, but say if we said half of New Zealanders were on fluoridated water, that means we've already got about 6,000 people with lowered thyroid function simply because of the fluoridated water. And then if they go and add it to the rest of New Zealand, we've got another 6,000 people. I mean, the whole thing is so, it's so against health, isn't it? It's the antithesis of health.
Anti-health.
And it's just mind-boggling that these people don't understand it, or they do understand it, they don't care. I mean,
that's right.
It's very strange.
What are we going to do? Give us a plan. Let's mobilize.
Well, if people join our newsletter, that would be good. So on our website, which is fluoridefree.org.nz, and on the right-hand side, they can subscribe to the newsletter.
Yeah.
And then, we'll be putting out, like what I was saying, what we're thinking of, asking people to do. We've got flyers and, lots of information and support and things. And I think one of the things that the government has taken a risk on doing this, though, is that they're going to now awaken a lot of people in the non-fluoridated areas. And those people, I've had people ring me who have said, I'm really pleased with how the government's handled the COVID, but, that this is terrible what they're doing about the fluoride. And so I said to a woman, well, I've met Ashley Bloomfield, and we had a workshop at the Hutt City Council. So we had 2 dentists and a doctor and myself on one side, and we had him and a dentist from the DHB, because he was the head. He was the CEO, I think, of the Hutt Valley DHB. So they were arguing for fluoride. Now we won the debate because him and the dentist didn't hardly know anything about fluoridation. So then I had a meeting with him, and I said to him, well, how do you think fluoridation actually benefits the teeth anyway? And so he got really annoyed at me because he didn't know. He may have thought the old theory that they had in 1945, that when you drink fluoridated water, this is what they used to tell people, that you need a fluoridated water, so as kids' teeth were growing, it got into the enamel and it made the enamel more resistant to decay. But since 1999, they changed that theory and they said it's topical, not systemic. So it's about being on your teeth, not from swallowing it. So they've got this new ridiculous theory about when you swallow it, a little bit comes out your salivary glands, but it's this really, really minuscule amount that would not provide a topical benefit. But anyway, when I asked him, he got really annoyed with me because he said that I had kind of hijacked him because I'd asked him this question.
I thought he didn't know the answer to.
Yeah, I thought that since he'd been arguing for fluoridation, he would know how it worked. So I didn't think I was hijacking him. And so he didn't know a thing.
Yeah.
And so then I had an email argument with him later, and all he could say was the American Surgeon General agrees with fluoridation. That's his whole argument.
Yeah, this is it. He's a systems man. Okay, so I got a couple of ideas. One is that because we're talking to the villagers here, and we actually have a water and fluoride group, which you're monitor of. So if we can get people to join that group on the village, and you can communicate with them in there. And have you got a functioning petition happening, on one of those petition app type things?
No.
It would be good
because,
wouldn't it?
Yeah, but what we found with the electronic petitions is they can kind of lose traction. Whereas if you have people with a hard copy and they go and stand out on the street outside the supermarket,
yes,
they're there talking one-on-one, and then the people that don't know much, they can give them a flyer. And I do think that works better ultimately.
Yes. So what I'm going to put out for now in this interview is that anybody who has a passion to keep your water clear in your area, please put your name in the water and fluoride group in the village, and Mary will be in touch with you and give you a petition so you can go out and you can stand on a corner and get everybody's. This is really important. We've got to handle it. And I also want to say, as I'm, part of working on the Hei Whakaputanga, the Wakamananga will not stand for this, and we will deal with it ASAP. In the meantime, everybody needs to stand up and say no. So let's do that. And then also you can let people know in that group if they want to learn more about fluoride. I hope that you post in there, Mary, but also, give people the address to join your newsletter or whatever it is that you want them to do, because you are our heroine of water in New Zealand. And, and I just really honor you for that and for carrying out that battle. And because the very first rally I went to for NZPP, the day we became Advanced New Zealand, you accosted me as I walked in. and you thrust papers about fluoride into my hand. And I just know how absolutely passionate and in action you are. And I really honor you for that, because it takes people who say over my dead body to make things change in this world. And we have to all become like that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, actually, this is no joke. It actually is over our dead body. The things that they're doing at the moment, right now, with vaccines that actually have a potential. It's a roulette with our body. Fluoridation, if you're talking about your mental capacity or your children's mental capacity, that's roulette as well. And we just got to get up and say no, because I tell you what, these people who are in charge of our health don't give a damn about our health.
No, they don't. And, for some people, they are actually allergic to fluoride, and it literally is over their dead body. Or if they don't die, there's a lot of people that are really seriously ill for a long time. And I think one of the things that have disturbed me about this over the years is that if people are so compliant that they will drink toxic waste, that they'll allow toxic waste added to their drinking water, and they will drink it. It comes from the chimneys of the phosphate fertilizer industry, contains traces of lead, arsenic, mercury, etc. If they will drink that, what I used to think was, if they're that compliant, well, how compliant are they? I mean, how much more compliant can you be? But I see what we've seen over this year is that people are scaringly compliant.
Yeah, I think also, especially in New Zealand, people are trusting.
Yeah.
They trust the government, and it takes a little while of having your eyes wide open to go, and it's a very disturbing thing to discover that the people in whose hands the trust of your life and your health and your children and education and all these really vital things in life are not actually out there to look after us. They're not there to look after us. In fact, the very system that they're involved in has been created not for health, but for profit.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, that's a big wake-up call, and not everybody's ready to get woken up and find out that, the people they trust are actually not trustworthy. Because, the thing about finding out that the people you've entrusted with all of these important things are not trustworthy is you then have to be responsible. You're responsible now. You're either responsible that you're giving it to untrustworthy people, or you're responsible to take it into your own hands. And not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
As we know, it's quite full on, isn't it? It's a full on task. But luckily, you're actually speaking to an entire community here who are all about that. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Tiamara. Thanks for having me on. It's really good.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.